Our next speaker is Aissatou Sow from Democracy Prep Harlem High School, New York. The title of her speech is When Whales Fight, the Shrimp's Back is Broken. Aissatou?
Korea is a nation known for their extraordinary success when it comes to the popular K-pop music attracting millions, the rapidly growing economy, the exquisite festivals, advancements in technology, and other aspects of Korean lifestyle that brings upon its popularity and value to many. However, this accounts to only South Korea. Why is that? Why has North Korea become an isolated nation while South Korea has been more influential to the free world? Well, the answer lies decades ago in the distinct period of time when Korea's response to external influences mattered most in contributing to the position Korea is in today. The late 19th and 20th century saw external and internal pressures for South Korea from the West, which affected its economic, social, and political prosperity. The United States and major European countries successfully opened China and Japan. These leading superpowers had made inroads on China and opened Japan to trade and to the West through gunboat diplomacy. These accomplishments made the West confident in opening Korea in a similar way. However, Korea denied to follow these commands imposed by the West. This led Korea to face bloody fights with Western powers. Ultimately, Korea was forced to open and give in not by the West, but to Japan. Soon after the signing of the Treaty of Ganghwa took place and manifested the relationships that Korea was going to have for decades to come, there were social and economic consequences that came with the opening of Korea. First and foremost, the Treaty of Ganghwa that Korea was forced to sign was very unequally one-sided. In the Asia for Educators, Columbia University website, the article Key Points in Developments of East Asia explains, quote, the 1876 Treaty of Ganghwa was a classic unequal treaty of the kind Western powers were imposing on Asian countries. The treaty gave Japan special trading rights and other privileges in Korea that were not replicated for Koreans in Japan. This clearly conveys that this so-called peace agreement was very biased and only benefited Japan and its national interests because it undermined the promise made in the treaty for Korea to have its independence. It gave Japan more benefits when it comes to improving their economy. One of the strong justifications for imperialism is that a country's economy can collapse if you don't find foreign markets to sell your goods. It's a vital rationale for Japan wanting to follow behind the US, who was a world leader in the industry. Furthermore, when Korea was annexed by the Empire of Japan in 1910, after years of war, Japan made an effort to obliterate Korean culture and language. In the article, How Japan Took Control of Korea on the history website, Aaron Blackmore, a journalist, wrote, to establish control over its new protectorate, the Empire of Japan waged an all-out war on Korean culture. Schools forbade speaking Korean. It also became a crime to teach history from non-approved texts, and authorities burned over 200,000 Korean historical documents. It validates the idea that Japan was seeking to hinder Korea. By forcing Korea to assimilate to Japanese culture, it gave high expectations for Koreans to adhere to social norms placed by the Japanese. Although World War II quelled Japan's control over Korea, leaving Korea to be independent, the country itself was split into two ideological competing ideas. This would lead to inevitable conflict between both sides who were very vociferous about maintaining their ideals. The Korean War. The Korean War was a major proxy war in which the US supported South Korea and the Soviet Union supported North Korea. Even though neither side has claimed victory, with North and South Korea still divided at the 38th parallel, Both sides still have tensions today. It is said that war between the two countries is still going on today because neither side had really complied with the peaceful armistice. Tim Marshall, diplomatic editor of Sky News, summarizes the hostility between both countries in his column by expressing, for hundreds of years, Korea has been a battleground for competing nations and ideas. But the last century, possibly the darkest in the peninsula's history, has seen it divided as never before. This indicates that this world event significantly impacted Korea because it defines how divided South and North Korea are when it comes to their ideals, their visions of governing, their economy, and so much more. The legacy of Korean colonization is the hardships Korea had to face in bringing their cultural identity to the light and figuring out how to run their country, which brought controversy from two sides and the stark division of Korea. Some lasting impacts on Korean history and society through the opening of Korea is the division that stands between the two Koreas today, with the peninsula suppressing a call for a possible unity for both countries to come together and put their differences aside. South Korea has transformed from the impoverished nation that came about from the dark gloom of Japanese colonial rule and other external pressures to becoming one of the most progressive countries in the world. Despite the horrific challenge the country had to face, it was still able to preserve its pride for its culture and national identity. A Korean proverb once stated, "When whales fight, the shrimp's back is broken," to delineate the country's devastation through the hands of external influences and neighboring countries. Even though Korea is no longer the shrimp and victim, the water it's in does not guarantee safety. Thank you.